talk to us about some career highlights and how you got into the game.
So I got into the game because my mum decided to start playing rugby at 36 years old, and my 14-year-old self wanted to be just like my mum, so decided to start playing. I was fortunate enough to grow up in Dubai because both my parents are military. So with that military upbringing, it took us out to the UAE. So I lived there from the age of 7 to 18 years old. So at that time, women's rugby wasn't really a thing. There wasn't a girls' team. So me and a friend from school rallied all the netball and basketball girls together from school, and we started the girls' club side. So that's where it started when I was 14. And then, as I said, came back to England for university at 18.
Fantastic. And then what was the progress into the professional game there from university, and what are some of the career highlights for you? What were some of your proudest achievements?
So I think with women's rugby, for those who don't know the landscape, you've got this quite a big difference between professional and elite athletes. So women's rugby in general is very underfunded. So say, for example, if you take Owen Farrell that plays for England, he'll play a fixture for England, and that will be the equivalent salary to what an England women's international gets in, which is crazy when you think about it. So when you talk about women's rugby at the top of the game, everybody works alongside. So it's only when I decided to go out and play in France that I was on a semi-professional contract, but I have always worked alongside, which in hindsight, I actually think is a great thing that I'm quite fortunate to do, because it means that I already had a career path laid out for me, which I was doing alongside rugby. So with university, I studied history and politics. I started playing for Richmond in the Premiership in my second year, and I did this alongside playing rugby league. And I just so happened to get scouted to play for England in rugby league. And then I went to the 2013 Rugby League World Cup, then came back for Richmond for a couple of seasons. We won a couple of Premiership National Cups. I then went out to Australia to play rugby there for Waratahs. Again, in Australia, you've got to work alongside. So I was playing for Waratahs, but I was working as a checkout girl at the airport. And then I worked for a construction company as an office admin just to supplement me wanting to play rugby. I came back to the UK and then I played for Aylesford Bulls, who was in the process of being franchised by Harlequins. And in that season, we won a Premiership National Cup title again, which was amazing. And obviously a lot of amazing career highlights. And then I spent a couple of years at Harlequins before heading out to France for my final season, which I knew that I would retire on. So I played for Toulouse in the south of France, which was lovely.
That's a great place to sort of finish your career, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
If everyone could end up in the south of France working, that would be the dream. There's a few comments in there about some of your tries. I noticed a lot of interceptions in those videos, I've got to say, in those highlight videos. Lara Squires mentions how we should have women's rugby on the mainstream TV more. And generally, what is your view and your stance on? There's a lot of conversation, rightly so, about women's sport and men's sport and the equality and things like that. What is your stance, particularly on rugby? Let's focus on that. What is your stance on that moving forward, and what can be done?
So I think with a commercial hat on, so men's rugby became professional in 1995, and it's in the place that it was now. But for women's rugby, it's still relatively new, and you've got to have commercial and that sponsorship backing and those TV rights for it to get on TV. So, and that's the only reason that men's rugby was really be able to become professional, was having those sponsors on board. So women's rugby is sort of in a vicious cycle at the moment of, yes, we're playing top flight women's rugby and we've got great athletes, but until those TV rights come in, people aren't going to then become professional athletes. So the game certainly has to grow. And in my time, in the back end of my career, I've been super lucky to be part of that process, especially when Aylesford was franchised by Harlequins. That was sort of the start of the process. And then the England girls started getting contracts 3 seasons ago. So it's all steps in the right direction, but it's all about raising awareness and almost changing the mindset of an everyday rugby fan that, yes, women play rugby, yes, expect a different brand of rugby, but it's still sport and rugby at the end of the day. So I think it is still going to be quite a long process, and I was very fortunate enough to be part of that process. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing where it does go in the future, but it's only going to grow from here, like the rest of women's sport.
Good stuff. Good to hear. And let's talk about your transition out the game, and that's really what you're doing now as the partnerships manager of LAPS. And for those that don't know, that's it stands for Life After Professional Sport. And there is a myth that once you become a professional sportsman, you are set up for life, and you don't have to work thereafter. And I think that's a myth that is, unfortunately, it comes from the Premier League footballers that are paid an absurd amount of money to do what they do. But there's sports like cricket and football and football and rugby and football to a certain extent below the Premier League, where you have to restart your life after you've played professional sport. So tell us a little bit about your journey out of the game and where that took you.
So, like I said, in that last season in France, I felt like I went out there because I felt, in rugby terms, I was getting on a bit at 26, 27 years old. And sorry if I've insulted anyone there, but in rugby, that can be deemed a little bit old. So I kind of wanted to go out there to finish on a high, but that ultimately didn't happen due to COVID. So this time last year, we were starting our second week of a national lockdown, and our contracts got stopped to Toulouse with immediate effect. So I had dreams of lifting the top 8 title and ending my career on a high, but that didn't happen. So the reality of it is that I had to come back to the UK, and ultimately I was plunged into the dark like the rest of us in a worldwide pandemic. So I joined LAPS as a platform to sort of give me some steer in my next direction. I'd always worked in like sports development. I'd worked with Surrey Storm Netball, who are a professional netball outfit, and Surrey Scorchers basketball. So I'd always been in that sort of development coaching type of sport, but I kind of like wanted to get into the commercial side of sport and the partnership sponsorship side. So I joined LAPS as a career platform, and then they just so happened to be advertising roles in August for new partnerships managers, which for me was a perfect opportunity to put my hand up and get into the more commercial side of sport. And it just so happens that at LAPS we're all ex-athletes. We practice what we preach, and yeah, we fully believe athletes make fantastic employees.
Absolutely. And for the people at the event that were with us in the early stages of us going into online events, we had Robbie Simpson, who's the founder of LAPS, do a Q&A with Hannah Gallagher, who I'm sure you know very well and you work with at LAPS, just giving an overview as to what you do. But in terms of sports people transitioning into the business world, there are so many transferable skills. Both two-part question for you: what skills have you identified that were used in sport, in your professional sporting career, that you now use on a daily basis or on a regular basis in your sort of business and working life, as it were? And then also with the athletes that you guys work with, what do you see as sort of the top 3 traits, for example, that you see that are transferable from sport to business?
I think majority of athletes have had to go through a part of hardship in their career. So definitely resilience. So for example, for me, I've had 2 ACL reconstructions. So on my knees, I've had my shoulder completely reconstructed. And so to be able to still come back from your sport and compete at the top level, like you will see on your televisions, athletes competing at the top level. Hopefully we'll be watching Tokyo in the summer, and those athletes have had to go through that whole year. Probably a lot of them are hoping to retire, but having to carry on training for another year. And it's not easy putting yourself through the arduous regime of training. So definitely the art of resilience, and in any, so for we kind of like working like sales, like partnership type of role, like you've got to have resilience. Like I could message somebody on LinkedIn and I'll be there like, hey, I work for LAPS, and they'll be like, no, thank you. And you're like, okay, moving on. And like, it can just like happen at any point. So just having the mindset to just stop, reset, and then just go again and not let anything get you down, because in sport, if that happens, like you're not going to be performing at your best. So definitely resilience. Also teamwork. Even if you take individual sports, say athletics, yes, they're competing as an individual, but they might be a sprinter who's part of a relay team who's going on to an Olympic final, or the whole athletics team, they are a team as a whole, even though they compete as individuals. So even if you think individual sport, oh, they're just on their own, they're not. Even in golf, you've got their golf caddy, so they're having to work for another person. So definitely teamwork in that. And then also just the interpersonal skills that you learn, and just being able to to talk your way out of a paper bag and just being able to talk to people, relate to people on different levels, I think is a really good skill that athletes pick up.
Yeah, I'm fortunate that my older brother was a professional cricketer at Sussex, and I've seen his transition out of the professional game and into starting his own business and into his business career. And, you know, another thing is goal setting. I think athletes are so good at setting personal goals and team goals that they're so good at breaking it down and knowing, right, to achieve that I need to do X and I need to do Y. And that's certainly something I've seen my brother take out. So I'll add that in. And we've got a lot of business owners in the room. We've got a lot of business leaders. I mean, what are how can people get involved with LAPS? I mean, it's a great platform for people to find talent that are coming out of the sporting industry, whether it be as professionals or whatever. So as businesses in the room, as business leaders in the room, you know, what would your advice be to them when sort of considering their next hire, their next recruit, and then considering someone that's been in the professional game?
So LAPS as a platform, we notice that recognise that it's really important to grab those athletes at the start of their career as well as the end of their career. So you could have an athlete that is competing at the top of the game and then they have a career-ending injury at 21 years old, or you have an Olympian who's been through the pathway all through their teens and then they didn't medal at the Olympics, so then they don't get funding, so they can't carry on their sport. So for example, we get funding from the FA to run career workshops all the way from under 16 to under 23 professional sports clubs. So we really have athletes at all ages, across all different stages of their career, or they've had an amazing career, they've retired at 35, and then they're going into the working world. So as a platform at the moment, we've got over 4,300 members, and with COVID in the last year and people's contracts ending and people reassessing, that number has gone up quite rapidly. And so as I said, we have so many athletes at different parts of their careers and all looking for work. If you look at rugby, cricket, people, and like rowing and sports like that, a lot of people have gone to university, and like I said, like female rugby players have had to supplement working full time alongside playing. So you could take on a professional athlete that already has that working background, has experience, but has been a professional athlete alongside it. So there really is a whole different range of what type of athlete that we have, which I think is really special. And I think it's really great that LAPS is the only completely free career platform for athletes for support. So you mentioned Hannah Gallagher at the start, who's a ex-England and Saracens player. She's just qualified as a careers advisor, so she works as our members manager, and she's constantly chatting to athletes, on the phone to them. And then we have 4 people in our partnerships teams chatting to businesses such as all of yourselves, saying, have you ever considered employing professional athletes? And a lot of the time the businesses come back to us and they give us the answers that we're trying to give them. Yeah, they're determined, they can set goals. Like how brilliant for PR for the company that we're taking on an Olympian. So it works both ways. Companies recognize the qualities in athletes, and then for us it's just matching that correct athlete to that business.
Yeah, they're going to come as a well-rounded package as an individual and from a career perspective as well. That's all from my questions. James Kelly from Storganize, and there's one just coming from Lara. James Kelly has asked, as a team of athletes working together, do you have a clearly defined physical exercise sessions throughout the week? Was it?
No, we don't. Like, for example, Kieran, he's up in Scotland as our partnerships manager. So he was a professional badminton player. He was hoping to go to Tokyo last year, but just hanging on for another year. It wasn't going to work out with his timelines and his playing career. So everyone comes from different sports, and still some people are still playing semi-professional sport. So me, for example, I've transitioned into refereeing, and I've been put on the national panel, which is really cool for me. So hopefully I'm going to progress in refereeing and rugby refereeing from now on. So we're all kind of still dabbling in our own sports, and as you know, each sport it requires different types of training and intensity. So no, answer to your question, we don't all train together, but we do talk about it a lot.
Sure. And Lara Squires has asked, one thing that might put me off is that they would be expensive. Is that a misconception?
No, not at all. So we recruit into businesses on entry level roles all the way up into director roles. So it's kind of, so you're employing an athlete on their previous experience like you would with a normal candidate, but it just so happens that they've been a professional athlete alongside it. So when we talk about placements and recruitment, we pretty much fall in line with any recruiter that a company already has on their preferred supplier list, on their PSL. But then we also have our sponsorship and partnership opportunities, which I'd love to talk to you more about when we go into the network rooms after, if anybody would like to hear more, which can encompass placements, advertising, crossover, working together, member meetups, discovery days, and events as well. So yeah, it's a common misconception that they are expensive because they're not. It just so happens that they have all these innate brilliant qualities already to bring to your business.
They've got a great story behind them, and that's what everyone is looking for in their employees, isn't it, really? Well, great, Holly, we're out of time, but I really appreciate your time joining us this morning. Be great if you can stay in the room afterwards and jump onto a few tables and chat to people. Holly will be around the room for the rest of the morning whilst we've got the room open. But for the time being, Holly, thanks very much for joining us, and we will also share information after today's meetup about laps so people can just check it out and get involved if they want to. So thanks very much, Holly.